So again, I'm very excited to be here. My training is actually in literary studies, and I had a brief stint into art history as an undergrad. But my turn to textiles has been a more recent development in my research. I've noticed that the works that I've been looking at for my dissertation are all kind of connected by a preoccupation with textiles in various forms. So I'm quite new to the field and will invariably fall into the trap that Jessica pointed out earlier today of being perhaps a bit too fast and loose with generic classifications and technical terms. And so I would ask both for your forgiveness when that happens, but also would be so grateful if you would help point it out and help me become more aware of my blind spots. But so all that to say, I'm really looking forward to the Q&A. So to the talk. Christa Wolf was born in 1929 in what is today Poland and was a major author in the German Democratic Republic. She begins her 1968 essay, Reading and Writing, by diagnosing one of prose's challenges in contemporary society, which is the need to write in a new way follows, even if at a distance, a new way of being in the world. Different formulations of this dilemma crop up in her writing throughout the next several decades, namely this idea of what it means to be in the world in a new way, but also how to go about writing. She describes it as a struggle to find the structures in which one can speak today. And this made me think of Adela and also Jessica's comments about how to be subversive when you're using the language or the structures that have historically been oppressive, how to operate within those. And I think this is exactly the same kind of challenge that Christa Wolf is trying to think through in her writing during the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and up until 2011 when she passed away. In 1982, she was invited to present the Frankfurt Lectures, an annual lecture series in which authors described their poetics. Her lectures are part travelogue, part philosophical musing, and lead up to her retelling of Troy's Cassandra from Greek mythology, who was cursed to prophesy the future, but never to be believed. In elevating Cassandra's voice, Wolf not only challenges readers to listen to the women around them, she also seeks to reclaim forms of writing that had been predominated by male authors. The lectures preceding this story of Cassandra identify Wolf's attempt to find a distinctly female mode of writing, a project that appears in dialogue with French feminist thinkers of the time period, including Sixou's Écriture féminine or Irigaray The Sex Which Is Not One. What Wolf turns to, however, is not new modes of writing or old modes of writing that she's trying to repurpose. In this lecture series, in which she reflects on her poetics, she claims that she has none. Instead, she points to the realm of textiles to describe her writing. And she says, if I had a poetics, the Gewebe, which can be translated as the tapestry, a woven cloth, a web, would be the central aesthetic image. This is not the only time that Wolf makes recourse to textiles as a metaphor to describe her writing. In City of Angels, or The Overcoat of Dr. Freud, published just 1 month before her passing in 2011, Wolf claims that her life is a patchwork quilt that has sloppily been stitched together. Clearly, Wolf feels there's something about the handiwork of fibrous materials that gets to the essence of her preoccupation with writing. In this presentation, I seek to explain the significance of textiles in her oeuvre, including its different political valences in a socially engaged author's life. I begin by applying her poetics of the tapestry, or her poetics of weaving, to an earlier semi-autobiographical work, Kindheitsmuster, or Patterns of Childhood, in order to show how the constant yet shifting nature of her recourse to textiles over the course of her work, changed over time. I will gesture to the significance of textiles in the GDR, so in East Germany, underground art, and how Wolf fits into this larger context. Ultimately, I claim that Wolf's aphasia, her struggle to write, to find new modes of writing, result from the intersection of patriarchy, fascism, and the threat of nuclear war, and that her turn to weaving allows her to rediscover her voice and hence establish new modes of writing, even in the midst of these outside forces. But first, a short introduction to Kindheitsmuster, published in 1976, this novel, Patterns of Childhood. Wolf began serious work on it the same year that her reading and writing essay appeared. The story recounts 4 narratives. The narrator's flight from Poland to Berlin at the end of World War II, a return trip in 1971 to visit her childhood hometown with her family, brother, daughter, husband, the process of writing the novel itself, and the present. So these four different levels of the narration. While the adult narrator or protagonist remains unnamed, the young girl is named Nellie, and the book posits itself as an attempt to restore a connection to this child. While Wolf first mentioned writing as a form of weaving in conjunction with her 1982 Cassandra text, the tradition of comparing text to textiles has a much longer tradition. I'm very grateful for Franny's presentation earlier, where she really went into depth in this. So I think I can skip over a little bit that I have here. But one of the texts, the inner texts that I wanted to point out for Wolf is an essay by Walter Benjamin on Proust. He talks about the image of Proust. Sorry, here's Cassandra. In describing Proust, he says, all great works of literature found a genre or dissolve one. In Proust's text, In Search of Lost Time, melds the genres of fiction, autobiography, and commentary in one, and is comprised of a syntax of endless sentences, elements which transcend the norm. The Latin word textum means gewebe, so tapestry, woven cloth, a web, Benjamin reminds the reader, before continuing on to say, no one's text is more tightly woven than Marcel Proust's. What then is the nature of this poetics of weaving? It entails not only the description of Proust's text that Benjamin delineates in the beginning of the essay, namely what you see up here on the screen, but also is constituted by the act of remembering, the actus purus of recollection itself. And Benjamin's conception of this process, forgetting is the warp, or the stable vertical threads, whereas remembering is the weft, the horizontal threads that weave over and under the warp. There is something given then in forgetting. It is the foundation which holds remembering in place, which allows the play of remembering to take place. And with these two oppositional yet complementary acts of forgetting and remembering to combine, these acts of remembering and forgetting combine to create the text. In describing this process, Benjamin claims, and I just want to really briefly read this. We know that in his work, Proust did not describe a life as it actually was, but a life as it is remembered by the one who had lived it. And yet even this statement is imprecise and far too crude. So the important thing for the remembering author is not what he experienced, but the weaving of his memory, his melody work of recollection. It's not then the restoration of the individual threads or even the completed tapestry that is most significant, Benjamin claims, but rather the actual process of remembering, of weaving itself. Proust, according to Benjamin, was engaged in a kind of handiwork that allowed his protagonist to create a memory that granted access to a distant past. This brief foray into Benjamin and to Proust via Benjamin is simply here to establish the validity, the justification in my mind of continuing to apply this poetics of weaving to Kindheitsmuster. So Kindheitsmuster shares significant similarities with Proust's In Search of Lost Time. Both are interested in projects of forgetting and remembering. Both seek to connect to a childhood that feels initially inaccessible, and both integrate social and philosophical musings with the quotidian and also significant experiences of their protagonist's childhood. Indeed, Benjamin's description of Proust's work could be directly transplanted to a discussion of Christa Wolf's patterns of childhood. Her reflections on the art of writing, her recounting of experiences from her life, her essayistic musings on memory and forgetting, and her sharp critique of the nuclear arms race between the USA and Russia, as well as the US involvement in the Vietnam War, blend together to create a literary work that defies easy classification, that also seeks to create a new genre by bringing these other older genres together. In what follows, I do not attempt to read Wolf's novel as a restrictive imitation of the new genre developed by Proust, nor do I seek to trace a philological genealogy of all possible influences, of all inheritances found within this text by Wolf. Rather, I seek to articulate how this notion of textile plays out in her writing, especially in this earlier work, The Patterns of Childhood. So, using Benjamin's definition of a text tapestry as a starting point, I'll tease out three levels at which weaving is operative in Kindheitsmuster: a temporal weaving, a psycholinguistic weaving, and a syntactical weaving. And I'm going to try to do this relatively briefly. We can talk about it a little bit more in the Q&A, but I want to make sure we get to the final presentation, which will be very interesting. So the first and most apparent level of weaving in Patterns of Childhood is the temporal. Wolf's text relates events spanning the late 1930s to the mid-1970s. Nella's childhood, her subsequent flight to Germany during the end of World War II, the narrator's family trip back to her hometown in 1972, and the actual time of writing itself. However, the text doesn't move in a purely linear fashion, but rather integrates all of these different levels together. Indeed, the novel begins with the claim that the connection to the past is tenuous and has been violently severed in contemporary society, and so seeks to bring the past into the present. This is the opening line of the novel. The past is not dead, it is not even past. We sever it from ourselves and position ourselves apart from it. In an attempt to reconnect to this past, Wolf's text moves back and forth between these temporalities, weaving them together and finding connections between seemingly disparate events. I've been doing a little bit of research in the archives here at the Academy of Arts in Berlin, and I was hoping to get some images of what this process of writing looked like for her, but there's a backlog and they weren't able to get to the scans before this. But I have a quote here from Christa explaining what this process looks like for her. So at 9:45, I sit down and start my notes on chapter 8. The usual 4 sheets are laid out on which I note the usual 4 levels: the journey, the past, the manuscript, the present. I am now thoughtfully approaching the crux of self-analysis, entering the JM, so the Young Girls Organization in the Hitler Youth, and what follows thereafter. I always enjoy making these notes. Later, they should no longer be separated, but should merge into one another. Sometimes one experiences this moment of melting together in an artistic idea consciously. So this process of weaving, of bringing these different elements together, is preceded by the process of creating different threads of the narrative, both literally and metaphorically, wherein one begins with a mass of fiber, the material, and then spins it into distinct threads. Wolf's practice of jotting down the temporal levels separately is akin to the process of spinning thread. She takes a jumbled mess and through the process of writing creates divisions and boundaries, producing thereby a sense of order and clarity. However, these threads are not meant to remain separate, but rather are supposed to come back together in the next stage of writing, which they pass into each other. This phrase that she uses, ineinander übergehen, which is talking about them coming back together, is reminiscent of the mechanics of weaving, in which the weft, the horizontal threads, are drawn over and under the warp, and thus create a cohesive whole, a melding together of disparate parts. I think I'll move on to the next level, the psycholinguistic weaving. It's closely connected to the temporal. The problem addressed at the beginning of patterns of childhood is, again, how to write. In other words, how do you avoid remaining silent? How do you produce literature in this present context? So she says, gradually over the course of months, the dilemma became clear: to remain speechless or to live in the third person, the first impossible, the other uncanny. And what she lands on is a splitting of the narrative voice. So the narrative is not related in the first person, but rather is split into the second and the third person. She describes this decision to write in you and she as a startling sound shift between the soliloquy, so a self conversation, a Selbstgespräch at the address, a change in grammatical connections. I, you, she swimming into each other in thought, so all jumbled together, should be separated from each other in spoken sentence. And throughout the progression of the novel, she uses she, the third person, to narrate the historical past, so the far past of the childhood, and you to narrate the level of returning to her hometown in Poland in 1971 and the process of writing. And it becomes clear that the point of the novel is to bring these two voices back together, to bring the you and the she, weave them together in order to create an I. So when will you and she collapse into I, she says. In the very last page of the novel, in the past, whose language rules could split the first person to the second and third, is its supremacy broken? Will the voices be calmed? And here, I don't know. The first time she reclaims her voice, I, the fusing together of the you and the she, is immediately undercut by an uncertainty here of I don't know. But it nevertheless is present. It's present in the text. I think I'm going to skip over the last element, the syntactical weaving, and just really briefly end it up with the significance of this weaving, why she turns to it. So by turning to weaving and handiwork as a metaphor, as her poetics of weaving, Wolf is positioning herself as the inheritor of several important traditions. First, she's drawing a line between herself and antiquity in her Cassandra lectures, making the claim of a kind of permanence or significance. This is important because her tales then carry the same weight as the authors of ancient texts that become classics. And this is a note I found in the archive in her Patterns of Childhood drafts and notes she was just gathering and making. She wrote down a week before his death, Brecht told one of his employees that no great artwork would be produced in Europe for the next 30 to 50 years. Why? A question she leaves and doesn't answer. And in 1971, 15 of those years have already passed. And so it's clear that one of the things that she's wrestling with is the same kind of problem that Brecht is bringing up. How do we write in the wake of World War II? How can we write poetry in the wake of Auschwitz, essentially? But connecting to older texts allows her to kind of establish this position of this inheritance, this tradition of significance of great artwork. Another reason for Wolf's turn to textiles was to connect with feminist movements internationally. Organizations like the Ladies Sewing Circle and Terrorist Society in Oregon, or the Women's Domestic Needlework Group in Sydney, Australia, found their counterpart in East Germany in the underground. Artists like Heike Stephan, and here in order, Heike Stephan, Cornelia Schleimer, and Gabriele Stützer, were turning to textiles to push against gender stereotypes, while simultaneously elevating the work of women. These artists also keyed into the critiques of consumerist culture that Western feminist textile usage was undertaking, while containing a distinctly socialist valence. And here are just a few images This is a still from a film by Cornelia Schleimer called Under White Tüchern, so like fabrics, under white fabrics or drapes. And another photograph of a performance that she undertook where she wrapped herself with fabrics. This is from Gabriele Stutzer, who also wrapped herself as a mummy. And then this from Heike Stephan, a fashion show, including woven blankets by Gabriele Stutzer. And we can talk more about this underground movement in the Q&A. And then this is the final point. This comes back to what Jessica was pointing out in the keynote speech earlier, as well as Adela's comment about subversive language and how to subvert. Finally, Wolf's recourse to textiles and weaving is also a move of political savvy, one that works to undermine her image as a member of the elite intelligentsia, and instead frames her as a member of the working class. Wolf was a very famous author in East Germany and received a lot of sponsorship from the state and a lot of public support. Whereas these other artists in the underground movement were actually working without permission from the government, which wasn't actually allowed. And so to position herself on the same level of them seems like an unequal comparison. But this allowed Wolf to posit herself as a faithful and committed socialist, fitting in with the working class, and precisely with the image of an ideal citizen as framed by the GDR. An interesting position considering her political activism. When it was after the fall of the wall, it was discovered that Christa Wolf actually had been an informal informant with the Stasi, with the government. Even though there was no record of her ever actually reporting on anyone, there was, connection. So connecting herself to antiquity, to feminist political movements, to dominant GDR ideology. None of these at times contradictory impulses precludes the other, but rather in Wolf's work, they're woven together, allowing a kind of harmony and dissonance. The tapestry that is her work and her life supports these threads moving over and under each other in order to create a complex cloth that reveals but does not reject the contradictions. Thank you.